We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host Leaha Mattinson. I'm so glad and thankful for each one of you who've joined us from around this beautiful planet to actually check out what we're talking about on Master Your Life today. Today, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the Master Your Life stage, Dr. 𝙇𝙞𝙩𝙩. David, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Leaha. Glad to be here.
That's so exciting to have you. Now, it's Friday morning, and we were laughing about being chipper first thing in the morning, and that's kind of an interesting space to be in. But I think you can develop yourself neurologically to operate at very optimal levels. And so that's actually what you do in your day-to-day work, and why I wanted to have you on the show the first time, and then to bring you back as a guest again. Dr. Dave and I met through a mutual doctor friend. And I think I had you on the podcast probably 4 or 5 years ago, right? Is that kind of about the ballpark?
I think that's right. Yes.
Yeah, you were one of the early ins. He was a brave soul coming on. But what's really important, what we were talking about at that time is, and Dr. Dave has special training in functional neurology. He's taught in Canada, Japan, the US, and now he is a practitioner in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. So David, can you tell the folks who are listening just a little bit more about yourself, your education training?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I graduated at University of Alberta with education degree, and then I went and taught in Australia for about a year and toured around there, and then went on to Japan, and then taught in Red Deer at a behavioral modification school. And I loved it, but I kind of saw a shelf life to it. And at that point in time, I went back to university and took my chiropractic down in Atlanta, Georgia at Life University. And, originally went there because I thought I'd get partial scholarship for playing rugby, but no, I was kind of past that and injured myself. But it was the best thing on earth, because then I found these courses and postdoctorate courses in functional neurology. And I just happened to be on the campus that was one of the head doctors in the field. Dr. 𝑸𝒃𝒍𝒆 was treating Sidney Crosby and other star NHL players with concussions. So I was able to learn from, definitely one of the best in the field at that point in time, and was able to work with the stars right off the bat. So it's just been this amazing journey ever since to learning, all these pathways, and more importantly, just seeing people that have been really down for a long time getting better and thriving again in life. So it's just been extremely exciting, and so grateful for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. And again, I'm so grateful that you're here to talk with our audience about this, because it's so important. Brain health. People think that they can willpower their way in and out of everything. And without a functional brain, you cannot. You cannot. It doesn't matter how good a person you are, how much training you've had, the best coaches in the world, the best parents in the world, or the worst, whatever, that your misfunctioning brain gets in the way of everything that we're trying to create in our lives. And so you had this really unique experience, not only of meeting those really exceptional players who had brain trauma, but you yourself were a rugby player. So you also had the insight of an athlete looking at fellow players, maybe even yourself, going, what am I doing to my head? Because rugby is rough. I played rugby a little bit myself in Red Deer, actually, and in Penticton. So yeah, very funny. And then one of my friends who was a trainer, I played when I was about 45. So nearly 10 years ago now. Anyway, but they said, seriously, do you know what you're doing there, Mattinson? Because you could get your teeth knocked out. Do you have any dental coverage? I'm like, no, I don't. So maybe I should rethink this thing. But so interesting though, to actually have these high level athletes, but also to be this player yourself, and then to go, what was changing? What was this changed brain actually showing up life in people's lifestyles? Can you identify for people who are listening in, what kind of things would a brain injury actually look like in day-to-day life?
Right. Yeah, you said so much there that was really valuable. So just to kind of rewind, a lot of people with kind of brains that aren't functioning to their maximum, they're going to feel all sorts of emotionality, and that's just not going to be gated, as we say. But the biggest thing too is people kind of blame themselves for all of it. So I kind of use the analogy, since the brain's a tissue like any other tissue in the body, is that, well, if you have a weak muscle, you can't blame yourself for having a weak muscle, but you can get it stronger. And then if it's damaged, you've got to rehab it. So like my own experience with concussions actually started as a kid with a bike accident. And it's, yeah, now looking back at it, like I had to be taken to the emergency room back then. And of course it was just the rest approach with it. But yeah, I was throwing up and dizzy. And then of course, just all these bizarre thoughts that come through your head when you have that acute concussion. And it's really hard to explain like what these thoughts are like when your head gets jostled around at such violent speeds. But I don't know, everybody's kind of seen the movies when an actor's had like a bad trip on some sort of drug or medication. Well, that's kind of how your brain's feeling when you first have a concussion. You're just disorientated and confused, and of course the anxiety shoots up. But after that event, and most people think, yeah, if you rest it, you get better. But the brain kind of learns to compensate for things. And you never really know if you're at your fullest, because that becomes your new normal, which is just, in some people's cases, maddening. Because they may look normal, but they're struggling even more than the average person to get through difficult situations. And they're suffering deep inside. And yeah, just rehabbing and getting people better, and seeing the lights come back in the brain, the affect, just how their facial expressions look, tells you right away that you're doing the right exercise or modality and firing into these right parts of the brain to get people back into their life and into their world, and functioning at the level they want to be at.
Yeah. Do you remember the age you were when you had that bicycle accident?
Oh, I must have been in elementary school. So
yeah, so that's a lot of years. And I guess why I want just for people to consider that for a moment is because how much ripple out effect that has on your success in peer-to-peer relationships, your academics, your attendance at school, your ability to actually complete tasks, complete assignments, even just to, work in groups. My son actually was in a pretty significant accident in high school and smashed his head into the windshield of a car. And he wasn't staying with me at that time, but where he was attending school, I called the people who he was staying with and I said, hey, don't let him go to school tomorrow. But that whole teenage testosterone, they let him out of the hospital. He went to school and he got kicked out. And the reason I didn't want him to actually get sent to school is because I knew he was going to be angry and that he would not have the emotional control to be able to actually just, leave or to not interact in things. That affected him for another 5 to 6 years, because he was, never mind the injury itself, but also that being suspended from school, he wasn't able to complete, he wasn't able to attend in his, because he told the principal to take a fly and flip through a rolling donut, essentially, which, probably wasn't going to fly very much with the principal. But I think it goes to this, we need to understand that just because you can't see it, when the brain is traumatized or harmed, it is a tissue. I love that analogy, it's not even an analogy, it's a fact. So it is a tissue. It can be weak, and it can be damaged. And then if you're just stuck there in suspension, then your also spirit takes a hit because you think, why can't I get out of this horrible shape that I'm in? And do you think that people actually lose their insight too, Dr. Dave? Like, do people actually know they're in trouble, or do they kind of lose that the aspect of insight? What's your experience been there?
There's a couple different mechanisms with it. So yeah, the lower parts of the brain kind of get twisted and torqued when you have a concussion, and then the higher centers of the brain get smashed back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So the lower parts of the brain are going to be in charge of autonomics, things that you really can't control. So blood pressure, heart rate, respiration, digestion, but also it's going to be your alertness centers and your fight or flight centers too. So if those become unstable, you're going to have basically an increase in whatever emotionality it is. And of course, in like an aggressive male athlete,
Mm-hmm.
that anger and everything's going to shoot up even higher. And then you lose the frontal control, which fires down and inhibits these parts of the brain and controls emotionality. So you've kind of got this dual system where all of a sudden you've got increased impulses for emotions that usually you wouldn't have, and they're going to spontaneously fire throughout the day whenever the brain's overstimulated or has too much on its plate. And then you lose the control centers that, once again, would tell you that telling the principal to flip off is not a good idea. It's going to get me in more trouble. So
Yes, your risk assessment might not be there.
it's just
or it is there, and then you go, oh, whatever. Just override that. Yeah, override that. So we've talked about anxiety and anger. Is there also, for people who are not the male aggressive, what is it like for the more emotions around that, like crying, weeping, sadness, depression, anxiety? Would you say those are the other side of the scale? Or maybe it's both. Maybe people are kind of vacillating between the two. What's been your experience there?
It's going to be both, and it also depends how long somebody's had a concussion. So usually anger and things are going to be approach emotions. So you get into higher kind of frequency of or state. Whereas depression, sadness too, they're kind of slower emotions, right? When things aren't going well or when the system's crashing, you're going to have more of those feelings. So yeah, people can also kind of rebound back and forth between the two. And there's also, of course, a difference in emotionality between left brain and right brain. So if all kind of depends on what systems get injured when you have that head trauma, and also what systems were weak before you had the head trauma. So yeah, there's once again kind of that weak muscle analogy. If you have a weak part in the brain and there's an injury, there's a good chance that weaker part of the brain is going to be the one that gets injured more or has more.
And what makes a weak brain? Like, what gives people weakness in different areas of the brain, even if you can give us just kind of the grandiose sort of.
Yeah, radon, one of the concussion assessment forms, it has history of mental illness, ADHD, schizophrenia. So you're looking at all these neurodevelopmental disorders. So basically how the brain developed and adapted as you were maturing plays into a factor later in life as well. And then, of course, if you have a head trauma or injury earlier in life, then that's gonna change some of these systems. If you have, say, an infection that affects the brain as well, you're going to have systems that don't work as well. And of course, stress is going to be a huge one too at different parts of your life. And then, of course, kind of which enrichment and opportunities you have for developing different parts of the brain are going to impact kind of the firing and the strength of different systems.
Yeah, this is so important. I'm so happy we're talking about this because the neurodevelopment, I'm a grandmother of 4 now. So it's like, yes, lots of little ones, and I just adore them. And the whole aspect of how we take care of babies in utero. And as a counselor also, I was a counselor for many years, a youth counselor in particular, and watched at the beginning of this, like in 1991 is when the really big uptick started in prescribing medication for kids who had neurological problems in school. And I went at that time, this is not for me. I know this isn't right. This is not right that we're doing this, medicating things instead of actually taking care of that neural development. So I'm really happy we're talking about this. Part of the last, year and a half, 2 years for people really has been about how do you take back your health? How do you take back your wellness? And not just for yourself, though. How do you actually help your offspring to be healthy when they come out of the womb? In Canada now, marijuana has been legalized. Not that we need to wade in on that very much, but it's just, what is the mother putting into her body? Alcohol consumption has gone through the roof, and it was already very high in terms of a coping mechanism, right? So now we're seeing these even more complex problems in terms of that neural development start. And so again, I just want people who are listening to this show, you listen to this show because you want to master your life. So you're either a father, a mother, a business owner, a grandparent, or, whatever that is, or even maybe a caretaker of somebody. Everyone's got a brain. Everybody. Everybody's got this. Everybody's got a brain. So it's like really being able to sit outside that person or yourself and evaluate, what am I doing to help myself neurologically? Because the consequences can be so significant throughout that person's life. So as a parent or somebody who's considering having a child, how do I make the development of that child's brain the best that it can possibly be in utero? And even if you're not a woman, if you're the man who has created this little babykins, then little peanut, then what are you doing to help support that? Are you helping that woman to have less stress in her life? Are you guys eating a good diet? What is it that you're doing to actually make yourself kind of the vehicle, the best vehicle, the Porsche, the Porsche of this of this experience, because we can do that. You don't have to wait until you've got these symptoms to do something. We can actually do something pre the babe coming along and give that little one more of an opportunity. What are other things environmentally? So we've talked about the mental illness. We've talked about stress a bit. We've talked about mental illness and not we've kind of talked about it as an umbrella of illnesses, which I think now there's, when I started counseling, Dr. Dave, there was like the DSM, the diagnostic manual for psychology was about 1.5 inches thick. And now I think it's multiple volumes of things. So there is this idea that if we can label something as a mental illness, or we can label something, then we can fix it. But it's this whole labeling thing has also become a real problem because everybody has got something now. So everyone's a victim of something. Something's wrong with me versus that. Am I well, right? How can I create wellness in this physical body? So again, just food for thought for people to go, what have I maybe been telling myself? And how's that helping me? Can you tell your stuff and it believes it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So your frontal lobes are going to fire down and kind of prep the system what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. So, and it's a big feedback loop. So basically everything starts at a receptor that goes through a nerve and ends up somewhere in the brain. So whether that receptor is in your eyes, in the muscle, in your gut, it's all sending a signal to the brain. So what we want to do is we want to skew things so that those signals going up to the brain are the best signals possible. Mm-hmm. And the gut, of course, is a huge one. It's been nicknamed the second brain. So, of course, if people are putting things into their body, that's sending a signal up to the brain. What nutrients do we have? What toxins did we just eat? Is there any bacteria, viruses that shouldn't be there? And it's all prepping the immune system to go do its job. And the immune system's either going to regenerate tissue and recycle some of those dead and dying cells, or it's going to go out and look for pathogens or create inflammation that shouldn't be there. So once again, what we put into our body is not just food being converted into energy or into nutrients. It's sending signals to the brain, which is going to then prep our mood and emotionality too. And of course, if a woman is pregnant when all of this is happening, it's going to affect what's sent to the baby as well, and how that developing nervous system is starting to get its signals and what it's already basically perceiving at the cell level with neurons. And when I taught in the behavioral school, one of the worst conditions was always the fetal alcohol students. And yeah, it's sad basically the states and processing that those little brains have when they're still developing. There's big gaps in the way they function. And I think too, like, we always think of what we can take away that shouldn't be there, but society's looking at it the wrong way. We need to be thinking what we need to put in that's actually going to make the system more healthy and viable. And that's not just the nutrition, it's also our thoughts and also the stimulation that we have. And then of course the negative stimulation, whether it's stress, is going to also send that signal up to the brain that fires down to a gland that pumps out all these chemicals that are not going to be good for us or for a fetus that's developing. So we really need to, once again, try to skew it as much into that positive plasticity and take away the negative from it. So it's fascinating too that we're able to have that much control over things. And the other thing that people don't realize with brain health is when you're trying to build new pathways in the brain, it's all about, well, there's three things that are going to lead to learning. And that's going to be, well, whether you're learning a sport, musical instrument, reading, how not to be dizzy, how not to have headaches. You need to do it at the right frequency, intensity, duration to actually make a change in the brain. So a lot of people, they sit down and they do too much of something, and they do it infrequently. So when you're trying to build these pathways, what you want to do is you want to do little doses of stimulation and let the brain quickly integrate it, recover, heal, build those connections. And then you want to continually repeat that frequently throughout the day. So the more somebody's injured, obviously, the less endurance with the neurons and the metabolic systems in the brain they have. So you really need to do low intensity, low duration, but very high frequency of these exercises to make a change. And that doesn't fit in with the traditional conventional model of healthcare, because when we look at rehab, we're still going off the same patterns of basically proteins and muscles and soft tissue where, okay, we'll see you a couple times per week. Well, the cells in the brain turn over in a matter of seconds quite commonly versus a muscle, which, it takes days to change. But the brain's just so metabolically active that these cells and connections are really in a matter of seconds and milliseconds. And the old model of, let's see you once or twice per week doesn't work with rehabbing the brain. And then usually the visits are too long or too intense and they're making, in some cases, people worse. So.
Yeah, very key. I love that you bring the attention to that too, Dr. Dave, because the encouraging thing about that, if you know that your brain cells are turning over just that quickly, you also can go, what if I could actually build a really great brain just that quickly? Maybe the rest of me will be a little bit slower to kind of, for it to show up in my physical body, but I can know with certainty when I'm doing these things frequently in the proper frequency, that they are indeed healing things. And eventually it will show up in my outer body, which is just a little bit slower to show those fixes. And I can attest to this in my own body, because 13 years ago, when I was given my diagnosis for Huntington's disease and the doctor said, come back when you're symptomatic, I was like, what? Like, are you crazy? That's a neurologist. Thanks. Thank you so much. But I thought, no, I knew about epigenetics. I've been an athlete for many years. But again, to your point about things being the wrong frequency, the wrong modality, the wrong intensity, Western athleticism also is about no pain, no gain. I was very grateful to come across Qigong, which is no pain, no pain. That's the practice. Is no pain, no pain. So I'm like, okay, good. So that's why I have really great affiliates that actually can help people learn how to do that. So Lee Holden, who's my master, we do all kinds of teaching that helps people to restore that the frequency of your body, and you can feel the healing happening within seconds. So that's very cool. That modality is very, very powerful. And also 13 years ago, when I was given that status, I went, how can I be well? And I knew at that time, because of losing 100 pounds, kind of when I was 30 years old and keeping it off, that about 80% of what we look like is what we put in our mouth. And at least 80% of what we look like and feel like is by what we put in our mouth. So I was and by what we ingest in terms of media. So I shut the TV off, because I had children who were 10 and 11 at that time. And I went, I want to not be a stark raving lunatic. Because that's actually a symptom of Huntington's disease, lots of mental illness problems, lots of impulse control problems. And a movement disorder that looks like you're drunk. So I always say I've had more skin in the game to be well than anybody I know, but because my why was very clear, I wanted to be healthy and well, and for them to have a reliable parent and somebody they could count on. So that was sort of why I made the health decisions I made along the way. And the reason my body looks great is because I took care of my brain. I didn't actually do any kind of nutrition to have a great body. I did all kinds of nutrition to have a great brain. And I did all kinds of activities to have a really great brain. And so that's been, I also withdrew from activities that I went, oh man, I know I don't feel good about this. And so just people's ability to actually withdraw themselves from things that don't feel good on the brain, whether that's alcohol or TV. Just laughing because, holy man, talk about fear-inducing media. Nobody is well. No one's got any natural immunity to anything. We're all just a big walking virus. So and that's not true. We have natural immunity, we have natural wellness. It's our human right actually to be well. And so that's why I love what you do, Dave, because you're really talking about how do you functionally know that you're okay? And how do you do self-assessments? And how do you hook up with a practitioner who's really good so that they can actually be that, like the mirror that you bounce things off of? Because the brain can be a tricky thing also. You can think that you're doing really well, but maybe there's something that's still a little glitchy in the flow of the brain. And when you have that third party sort of observer, they can help you to, maybe reassess or reevaluate. And before we got started on the podcast, we were talking about, well, what should we talk about? Should we talk about chronic concussions, that chronic traumatic encephalopathy? And you said, no, actually is this persistent concussions symptomology, that's interesting. And I think a lot of people are suffering with symptoms that look like persistent concussion, and maybe they're waiting for a diagnosis of something before they do anything about it. But what we're encouraging here always on the Master Your Life show is start being your own best diagnostician, see what's going on, and believe people who are trustworthy and you respect if they give you feedback that something is not quite right. And with your behavior, for example, we're dealing with somebody who has dementia in the family as a result of the Huntington's disease. You need to give feedback. You need to be honest. You need to be also thoughtful and caretaking about that as well to help them to manage. So it's not like you don't say anything when people are experiencing these traumas. You need to figure out how you're going to deal with it, including within yourself and your health and well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah, the first part of that is going to be the energy management.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain basically needs three things to survive and thrive. It needs oxygen, glucose, and stimulation. So two of those are going to be fuel, and then the other is stimulation. And well, if we're not breathing properly, which is one of the hugest ones, you see people that have all these tight neck muscles, and they're only breathing from their upper rib cage, and they're in this kind of panicked anxiety state where they're almost hyperventilating. You know, you're not getting good oxygen exchange into the brain. Plus, then you've got all those sore muscles because the wrong ones are the ones you're breathing with, because you're in that state throughout the day. So the first one is just the deep breathing, and that's also going to relax things, improve oxygenation, and also fire into the brainstem. So the easiest free thing that people can do is start to do deep breathing exercises.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the biggest one. And so the energy management too, not letting yourself get overstimulated. So in the morning, we need stimulation to wake up, get the system going. So sunlight's kind of been that one that's throughout the ages, and we've adapted to that's given us that initial boost of energy in the morning. Well, now we've got so many other sources of light that feed into the brain, and cell phones, of course, computer screens. That blue light is going to be excitatory. So at the end of the day, when we're trying to actually get some sleep and regenerate our brains and nervous system and our body, we're overstimulating it at the wrong time as well. So managing your stimulation at different points in the day is going to be key too, because you can't operate all the time in a high energy state. You're gonna burn things out, and those right now are the biggest things. So getting the proper fuel into the brain, and then managing the stimulation, and then you've got a better idea of how to manage your energy levels throughout the day too, so you can think, perform, and be there for the people around you as well. You can't be a good parent or partner or anything else if your brain's sporadically firing in the wrong direction. And the other thing too, well, we didn't go into glucose that much. Well, glucose is a primary fuel source as well, but so many of us are having dips and spikes in our blood glucose levels, and that's going to be toxic to the brain as well. So getting that nice steady state of energy throughout the day, so eating high fiber foods, and then too sometimes being in a ketogenic state is very beneficial to people too. So you're replacing the glucose with ketone bodies, and that too usually kind of happens during those dark winter months, where of course the few food source out in nature would have been more your fats and proteins versus carbohydrates, and of course you're getting less sunlight for that stimulation. So kind of in those darker winter months, it might be a good idea to go ketogenic if you're looking to kind of recharge things as well. So there's all these things that are kind of out there that people are starting to pick up on to hack the brain. But to keep it simple, basically, the first one's going to be the oxygenation, the breathing, the relaxation techniques, and then of course managing your energy intake and your stimulation levels. And then you can really start to hack the brain to perform at the level you want to perform at.
Yeah, love all those ideas. And I did the ketogenic diet from the age of 40 to 45 without a cheat day, again, because I knew how much benefit it had to the brain. And since then, I would say I'm keto adapted. So I'm sometimes doing that, sometimes not, just to be more tolerable to other people from a socialization perspective. Because if you won't break bread with people, they don't like it. They want to sit down and eat meals with you that are sort of normal. So there has been this sort of transcendent, figuring that out along the way, and it's worked. I think that's worked out well.
And I think
Yes.
you and everyone else need to give yourself permission to do that, because there are going to be times where you dip in things and then you come back, and that cycling's kind of normal with our psyche. We're not going to be always doing the best thing. Some people need to, though. Like if there's a severe autoimmune condition, they've got to stick to a strict diet and regimen as well, and in some neuropathology as well, and those people really have to stay with it. But normal people, there is a little bit of once again, you're going to dip in how strict you are with yourself, and realize it, and then you bounce back even better though the next time, which is the great part of it.
Yeah, there's a little play in there, right? I do. But see, and one of the things I want to mention too is around nutrition, and I will do a shameless plug for the nutraceutical that we have now in stock, that we are promoting because it's got multiple patents on it for helping improve brain function and your own state of health and well-being. Most people are not really prone to jumping into doing a full practice of Qigong, even if it's only for 30 seconds or 7 minutes. They just, you suggest things to people and they go, oh man, like I'm too tired to do that. But what most people are adapted to is actually taking pills or taking things that will orally that will help them to feel better. So for anyone who's actually looking for a good quality product to actually help them with neurological function, which I take myself, so I will say it definitely has improved my own neurology, that cognitive function, emotional control, those things, along with all the other things that I do. But Quadrimune and Nanostil both of those products, and there's more, but you can find those two in particular on masteryourlife.ca. So if you have someone in your life that's been struggling with this for any amount of time, get them over to the site. There's interviews from the doctors that invented it, from the founders of the company, so you can get more information about how exactly it works and what exactly it works on. I've interviewed people who have autoimmune conditions who also use the Quadrimune on a regular basis and that have improved their experience of day-to-day life. And so just to kind of switch gears a bit, people can go again to Master Your Life to take a look for those nutraceuticals. But autoimmune is a whole other, we started out talking about concussions. Autoimmune is a whole another horrific thing to live with, that it's painful.
It's huge. Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing people don't realize is the brain is one of the most heavily immune regulated parts of the body. And the reason for that, again, is that the immune system is also going to be responsible for recycling cells. So the term is apoptosis, where cells die. Well, the analogy I use for that is kind of like old cars. Well, a car is dying, but there's still parts of it that you want to take out of it. So the immune system's responsible for going in there and taking the good parts out of the cells and recycling them and regenerating the tissue as well. But it's also one of those organs where all these cells, your microglia, can become primed, and they go around basically snipping all these connections. They should do it at a rate that's nice and slow, something you haven't done for a while. It's not needed, so the connections are cut and cells are recycled. But when the microglia are primed, then they go around and it's just havoc, because they're cutting all sorts of connections that between cells that shouldn't be there, and of course attacking cells that should be, that technically are somewhat healthy, and they can be primed for so many different reasons. So yeah, you have to definitely look at the immune factors as well, especially in these longer lasting conditions. And of course, diet is going to be one of the things that flares up the immune system on a constant, regular basis. So those, once again, the signals from the gut to the immune system is really going to affect the connections in our brain as well. And yeah, if you've got an autoimmune condition, then the immune system's primed in the wrong direction, and it's really, really sensitive to anything, And then, of course, all these people are going to have brain fog and fatigue, and then other issues with how they function and feel.
Right. Interpersonal relationships, business problems, bank failure, cheating, lying, stealing, like moral problem, moral corruption, all happens from the basis of your misfunctioning brain. So if you are feeling tempted to do things that you don't normally feel tempted to do, all of this stuff is such, our brains are so awesome. They're so incredible, but they're incredible both ways, right? It's like they can be incredibly awesome or they can be incredibly a train wreck. So trying to figure out that middle path is part of it also. But being the observer of your own body and life. We've got so much to talk about. We have about 7 minutes left. Can you share a story, Dr. Dave, of somebody that you've worked with that you just went, oh, if I could just tell everybody this one story, they would really get how important this functional neurology is.
Oh, geez. The one that comes to my mind was a lady who came in when I was practicing down south. She had a slip and fall at work, and then she was mandated a steroid injection, and then she sort of had a stroke-like event. And of course, with the MRI, it didn't really show up, but she was in a spastic posture. She lost all sidedness on part of her face. She was a 38-year-old mother who looked like she was 80 years old, came in on a walker, and within doing these intensive programs throughout a year and home exercises, she was able to go from the walker to a 4-prong cane to a cane to walking her daughter across her high school graduation. So it was just one of these things. You saw her get her life back, and there's just something about walking that is just so much human that we don't realize it, because most of us are doing it all day, every day. But when something like that's taken away, it's not only the walking, it's usually to the freedom, and in her case, of course, it was brain related firing down. So there was all sorts of cognitive loss, memory loss as well. And she started to get it all back. So it was just one of those cases that it was amazing to see her progress, and just heartwarming.
That's awesome. Congratulations to you and to her on that. Incredible work. You have to put in the time, right? Yeah, absolutely. Just really, and those stories, I think we should be hearing more of them. There should be more people who are restoring their health and well-being, because we have so many people who have balance issues, who've had injuries they don't even know about. We don't have time to get into the kind of onset of dementia, but one of the things that's happening with this Jabberwocky is that there is dementia showing up in people. And so for people who are interested in doing their own research, we can go to some studies that are maybe in Israel and see what some of the, data is that's coming out of that, because one of the side effects of experimental anything is that you could have some sort of features or response to that thing that you're putting into your body that wasn't what you expected. So then it's like, how do you actually respond and react to healing the symptoms of whatever that is? And so whether that's blood clots or it's dementia that seems to be coming out of some of the studies, how do you get ahead of that? And especially knowing with dementia that is something that organically is happening, that happens in the brain, so this is what we're talking about here on this episode, and arming yourself with sort of those preventative measures is really key to keeping the brain healthy, and also to understanding that you as a human have the right to be healthy. So it's like people think they don't have the right to be healthy. It's so odd, that they really don't believe that. They think that it's normal to be sick. By the time I'm 50, I'm going to feel like this. And by the time I'm 60, I'm going to have, all these things wrong. And by the time I'm 80, it's going to be this way. And we've really got to start telling a different health story. When it becomes normal at 35 years old to have type 2 diabetes, or at 30 years old, that's a normal thing, that's very odd. And it's something that we could be a little more introspective about, is like, how do we heal these things? So Dave, where do people find you? And then how do people find other practitioners that do what you do and where they are living?
Right, absolutely. So I can be found at the Hardy Brain on Facebook and Instagram. And then my office is Collegiate Sports Medicine in Red Deer, Alberta. And then as far as finding other doctors that practice functional neurology, the best place to go is acnb.org. And that's the American Chiropractic Neurology Board. But once again, I can be found on social media, the Hardy Brain, and then at the office, Collegiate Sports Medicine.
Awesome. Love it. We'll put that all in the show notes. So anyone who wants to reach out to Dave, you can do that. He's an awesome practitioner, an awesome healer. And it might be also a chance to come and visit beautiful Alberta, Canada, which we have gorgeous mountains here. And, if you want to, check that scenery out, if you've never been to Canada, this would be a great reason to do it. Come yourself, bring a loved one, go to the clinic, see Dr. Dave, and get hooked into having a better functioning brain. That would be really incredible for not just yourself, but your entire family. So Dave, we've got a couple of minutes left. Can you share one more practice that you could get people to do or evaluation where they might go, I should pick up the phone today and do something about this?
Look at videotapes of you walking and compare it to other people. So one of the neurology textbook kind of said it best is you can usually observe how the brain is functioning just by watching people. So you can see it in facial expressions, affect, but you can also see it in how people move. And that's going to be the biggest one. There's a reason why we look at somebody and say they're confident, or we look at somebody and say they're looking sad, depressed. And don't underestimate your ability to kind of observe. And sometimes you just have to watch it and see that things just kind of look awkward or aren't feeling right with you. So, and it doesn't have to be a diagnosed condition to say, this isn't working right or not feeling right, and I need to do something about it. The key is to figure out, once again, what part of the brain is firing too much and needs to be calmed down, or what part of the brain is firing too little and needs to be stimulated. So just observe, and you'll be able to figure out your health, and then it's the journey of figuring it out from there. I guess that's going to either be very rewarding or probably a little frustrating at first, though.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. David Hardy. We really appreciate you being a guest on the show today. Anyone who's looking for solutions around neurology, get a hold of him at his clinic, find a functional neurologist in your area, come to the masteryourlife.ca website, check out the nutraceuticals to help you to feel well, and the patents that are behind those you can do the research on. We just really want people to feel well. That's the mission of Master Your Life, to have a satisfying, happy, joyful existence. And so thank you, Dr. Dave, for helping people to be able to assess whether or not they're actually experiencing that. And I would love to have you on again if you're game to do that. Maybe we could talk about sleep hygiene, which we didn't really get into, but might be kind of fun.
For sure. Thank
Awesome.
you, Leah.
Thanks so much. All right, everybody, love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.